Did you know that within the quiet walls of ancient convents, some of the most daring women in history lived? What if we told you that nuns weren't always meek and secluded, but fierce, intelligent, and revolutionary? From the 13th to the 18th centuries, a special group of women, known as the Poor Clares, proved that true strength wasn't found in armies or crowns, but in unwavering conviction. Number 6. Saint Veronica Giuliani, the Abbess of Ecstasy and Practicality. In the year 1660, in a small town called Mercatello in Italy, a girl named Ursula Giuliani was born. Even as a child, Ursula showed a deep sense of devotion, a spirit that seemed to look beyond the ordinary world. Her family was well off, but Ursula had a strong pull towards a life dedicated to God, a life of simplicity and service. She often spoke of visions, experiences that set her apart even at a young age. This intense inner life did not make her strange or distant, but rather seemed to ground her in an even deeper reality. She believed her purpose was to embrace the rigorous life of a Poor Clare nun. When she was 17, Ursula made the momentous decision to enter the Capuchin Poor Clare convent in Città di Castello. This was not a decision taken lightly. It meant leaving behind her family, her name, and the familiar comforts of her life. Upon entering the convent, she took a new name, Veronica, symbolizing her new commitment. Her early years in the cloister were marked by the demanding routine of prayer, silence, and communal life, but also by a continuation of her profound spiritual experiences. These were not always comforting. Sometimes they were intense, even painful, reflecting the suffering of Christ, which became central to her spiritual journey. Peak of her mystical life came in 1697, when it was reported that she received the stigmata, the wounds of Christ, on her body. This was a phenomenon that drew both awe and scrutiny. For Veronica, these were deeply personal and sacred experiences, which she approached with humility and obedience to her superiors. The convent and church authorities investigated these occurrences, and Veronica herself was commanded to describe her inner life in meticulous detail. This command led to the creation of her expansive spiritual diary, known as Il Tesoro Nascosto, which means the hidden treasure. Over many years, she filled thousands of pages, documenting her prayers, visions, temptations, and her struggles to understand God's will. This diary is an extraordinary record, revealing a soul utterly devoted to its spiritual path, exploring the depths of Christian mysticism. The act of writing such a detailed account, under obedience, was a discipline in itself, requiring immense focus and honesty. Despite these extraordinary mystical experiences, Sister Veronica was no ethereal mystic floating above the practicalities of daily life. Quite the opposite. She was known for her remarkable practicality and her strong leadership skills. Within the convent walls, she took on various roles, from novice mistress guiding the younger nuns to bursar managing the convent's often meager finances. She understood the importance of order, efficiency, and resourcefulness. The nuns relied on her sound judgment in matters large and small. She ensured that the convent was run with discipline and care, reflecting her belief that external order supported internal spiritual growth. In 1716, Sister Veronica was elected Abbess, the highest leadership position in the convent. This was a testament to the trust and respect her sisters had for her. As Abbess, she was responsible for the well-being of all the nuns, the upkeep of the buildings, and the financial stability of the community. These were not easy tasks. Convents often faced financial struggles, and buildings needed constant repair. Veronica approached these duties with the same dedication she applied to her spiritual life. She would often inspect the convent personally, making sure everything was in its proper place and that the needs of the sisters were met. She showed a particular concern for the sick and the elderly nuns, ensuring they received proper care and comfort. Her leadership was firm but compassionate, always rooted in the rule of St. Clare and the spirit of poverty. She had to navigate the complexities of external relationships with benefactors, local authorities, and the broader church. Her ability to do so while maintaining her deep spiritual life was truly remarkable. Her life was not without its challenges. Besides the physical pain of her mystical experiences, she also endured spiritual trials, periods of profound darkness and doubt, which she faithfully recorded in her diary. She also faced scrutiny from church authorities regarding her reported stigmata and visions. They conducted rigorous examinations, testing her humility and obedience. Veronica met these trials with unwavering steadfastness, always submitting to the judgment of the church, while holding fast to the truths of her experiences as she understood them. She never sought recognition or attention for her gifts, but rather desired only to serve God and her community. Veronica Giuliani passed away in 1727. Her life demonstrated a rare blend of profound spiritual depth and highly effective practical leadership. She proved that the most intense mystical experiences could coexist with the demanding responsibilities of an administrator and a careworker. Her example showed that true holiness was not just about extraordinary visions, but also about the everyday dedication to duty, to community, and to selfless service. Her unwavering path, her ability to lead with clarity and compassion while enduring immense personal and spiritual challenges, marked her as a woman who transcended the ordinary expectations of her time. Her legacy continues to inspire those who believe that spiritual and worldly responsibilities can be harmoniously integrated within a life of unwavering faith. Number 5. Maria Celeste. Galileo's unseen intellect. Virginia Galilei was born in Padua in 1600. Her father was the renowned scientist Galileo Galilei, a figure who would reshape humanity's understanding of the cosmos. Virginia, however, was Galileo's illegitimate daughter, a fact that, in the strict social world of 17th century, Italy meant a different path for her. At a young age, along with her younger sister, she was placed in the Poor Clare convent of San Matteo in Arcetri, a serene location nestled in the hills near Florence. There, she took the name Maria Celeste, a choice that perhaps reflected her father's celestial observations and her own deep spiritual aspirations. Life within the convent walls was one of profound cloister, separating the nuns from the bustling outside world. Yet, for Maria Celeste, this did not mean a life disconnected from her father or his monumental work. Her most enduring legacy is her extensive correspondence with Galileo. Over 120 of her letters to him have survived, providing a unique and incredibly personal window into her life, her relationship with her famous father, and the realities of convent life in that era. Sadly, Galileo's letters to her have been lost, but her replies paint a vivid picture of their close bond. Maria Celeste's letters reveal a woman of remarkable intelligence, practicality, and emotional depth. She was far more than just a daughter. She was her father's confidant, his housekeeper, his nurse, and his unwavering supporter. From within the cloister, she managed many of his affairs. She would send him remedies for his various ailments, carefully prepared with herbs from the convent's garden or simple medicines she could acquire. She mended his clothes, often using fabric scraps available to her, demonstrating a quiet ingenuity. She would even prepare special dishes for him, like candied citron, to help with his digestion or simply to bring him comfort. Her letters often included advice on managing his household, reminders about his health, and careful notes about his finances, revealing a sharp and attentive mind that was concerned with the mundane but essential details of his life. Beyond these practical matters, Maria Celeste was deeply engaged with her father's intellectual life and his profound struggles. While she could not participate directly in his scientific endeavors, Her letters show a keen understanding and appreciation for his work. She listened to his scientific discoveries, perhaps through visits or through letters from him, and understood the implications of his theories. When he faced the infamous trial by the Inquisition regarding his defense of the Copernican view of the universe, Maria Celeste became his steadfast pillar of emotional support. Her letters during this period are filled with expressions of unwavering loyalty, prayers for his safety, and attempts to offer solace and comfort. She would write to him assuring him of her constant prayers, offering words of encouragement, and sharing her own spiritual insights to help him navigate the immense pressures he faced. It was a remarkable form of intellectual and emotional partnership conducted entirely through written words across a cloister wall. Her letters also provide fascinating insights into the daily life of a Poor Clare nun in the 17th century. She described the challenges of poverty, the constant struggle for basic necessities like food and warmth, and the frequent illnesses that plagued the community due to meager resources and poor living conditions. She spoke of her own recurring ailments, particularly her stomach problems, which seemed to be a constant companion. Yet even in describing these hardships, her tone was rarely one of complaint. Instead, it was infused with resilience, a spirit of acceptance, and a dedication to her vows. She found joy in small blessings and strength in her faith. Maria Celeste passed away in 1634, at the relatively young age of 33, likely due to the cumulative toll of persistent ill health and the rigors of convent life. Her death was a devastating blow to Galileo, who deeply mourned the loss of his beloved Virginia. Maria Celeste's life defied the common expectation of a cloistered nun as someone completely removed from the world. Through her letters, she actively participated in her father's life, his triumphs, and his deepest crises. She was an intellectual partner, a shrewd manager, and a profoundly empathetic soul who bridged the seemingly impassable gap between the austere life of the convent and the turbulent world of scientific discovery and religious controversy. Her intelligence, her practical capabilities, and her fierce loyalty to her father, all expressed through the written word from within her secluded cell, revealed a strength and engagement that transcended the physical boundaries of her existence. She proved that, even within the most structured and confined life, a powerful and influential mind could thrive and leave an indelible mark on history. Number 4. Blessed Catherine of Bologna, artist, scholar, and spiritual guide. Caterina de' Vigri was born in Bologna, Italy in 1413, into a noble and cultured family. From an early age, it was clear that she was no ordinary child. Her family's connections led to her being raised in the vibrant court of Ferrara, where she served as a lady-in-waiting to Princess Margaret d'Este. This was a prestigious position that came with extraordinary opportunities for education and cultural enrichment. Catherine thrived in this environment, displaying an exceptional intellect and a wide range of talents. She mastered Latin, a rare feat for women of her era. She excelled in music, learning to play several instruments, and she showed remarkable promise as a painter. She was surrounded by the intellectual and artistic currents of the burgeoning Renaissance. Despite this privileged upbringing and the path of worldly success that lay before her, Catherine felt a growing call towards a different life. She chose to leave the glittering court of Ferrara, a decision that must have puzzled many. Instead of marriage or continued courtly life, she joined a community of pious women in Ferrara. This community, initially a group of tertiaries, people who follow a religious rule but do not live in a convent, gradually moved towards a more structured religious life, eventually adopting the rule of St. Clare. This was a deliberate choice to embrace radical poverty and communal living, a stark contrast to the opulence she had known. Within the convent, Catherine did not abandon her artistic and intellectual pursuits. Instead, she integrated them into her spiritual life. She continued to paint, creating beautiful devotional images, some of which are still preserved today. She illuminated manuscripts, adding intricate designs and vibrant colors to sacred texts. More importantly, she became a prolific writer of spiritual texts. Her most famous work, The 7 Spiritual Weapons, was a guide for spiritual combat, offering insights into overcoming sin and growing in virtue. This book, written by a woman for her sisters and for a broader audience, showcased her deep theological understanding and her practical wisdom in spiritual matters. It was an extraordinary achievement for a woman in the 15th century to author such a respected theological work. Catherine's talents extended beyond art and scholarship. She possessed a natural gift for leadership. In 1456, she was called upon to establish a new Poor Clare convent in her hometown of Bologna, the convent of Corpus Domini. She became its first abbess. This was a daunting task, requiring not only spiritual guidance, but also significant administrative skills, including managing finances, overseeing construction, and navigating the complex relationships with the local church and civic authorities. As Abbess, Catherine was known for her wisdom, fairness, and her compassionate approach to governance. She created a nurturing environment where the nuns could thrive spiritually and intellectually. She understood the challenges of daily life within the cloister and provided both spiritual direction and practical support. Catherine also experienced profound mystical visions and spiritual depths, yet these never detached her from her practical duties. She believed that spiritual experience should be grounded in humility, charity, and diligent service to God and community. Her leadership was therefore balanced, combining deep contemplation with effective administration. She maintained her artistic expressions even while burdened with the responsibilities of being an abbess, showing her ability to multitask and integrate her different gifts. When Catherine passed away in 1463, her sisters buried her simply, without embalming. However, 17 days later, due to a pleasant aroma emanating from her tomb, her body was exhumed. To their astonishment, her body was found to be incorrupt and remarkably preserved. This was a powerful sign to the community of her holiness. Her body was eventually placed in the chapel of her convent, where it remains to this day seated upright in a special shrine, attracting pilgrims and admirers. This unique and powerful physical presence, centuries after her death, speaks volumes about the impact she made. Blessed Catherine of Bologna's life was a testament to the fact that immense talent, intellectual prowess, and artistic creativity could be fully integrated into a life of radical religious devotion. She defied the expectation that a woman of her noble birth and gifts would pursue worldly fame or marriage. Instead, she chose a path of humble service, yet through that path, she became an influential writer, an inspiring artist, and a wise, spiritual leader. Her ability to effectively govern a convent, produce significant intellectual works, and maintain a vibrant artistic life, all while living under the rigorous rule of St. Clare, showed a fierce dedication and multifaceted strength that transcended the conventional boundaries of her era. She proved that the cloister could be a place not of confinement, but of profound intellectual and spiritual flourishing. Number 3. Saint Colette of Corbie, the fearless reformer. Nicole Bollet was born in Corbie, a town in Picardy, France, in 1381. Her parents were not of noble birth, but her father was a skilled carpenter for the local Benedictine abbey, providing a connection to the world of faith and service. From a young age, Nicole displayed a deep piety and a yearning for a life fully dedicated to God. Her childhood was marked by simplicity and a growing desire for spiritual perfection. As she grew older, Nicole embarked on a profound spiritual search, trying to discern where she truly belonged. She initially tried joining various religious orders, including the Beguines and Benedictines, but found that none fully satisfied her deep longing for a stricter, more authentic religious life. She even lived as an uncaress, a solitary hermit, confined to a small cell attached to a church for 4 years. This was an incredibly austere way of life, requiring immense self-discipline and fortitude. Yet, even in this extreme solitude, she felt a different call. She began to experience visions and heard what she believed to be a divine mandate. She was called not to a life of personal seclusion, but to reform the Poor Clare order. This calling came at a turbulent time in church history, known as the Western Schism, when there were rival popes and a general sense of decline in spiritual discipline within many religious orders. The original rigorous rule of St. Clare, with its emphasis on absolute poverty and strict enclosure, had become relaxed in many convents. Colette saw this as a profound spiritual loss and felt compelled to help restore the order to its foundational ideals. This was a truly formidable task, requiring not only spiritual conviction, but immense courage and resilience. Her mission of reform faced significant opposition. Many within the church hierarchy were resistant to change, and some nuns were unwilling to embrace stricter rules after decades of laxity. She also needed official recognition and support to begin her work. It was through a controversial figure, the anti-Pope Benedict XIII, who, despite his contested legitimacy, provided her with the necessary papal authorization, that she received the mandate to reform convents and found new ones. This pragmatic decision, though politically complicated, was a necessary step for her to move forward. With the papal decree in hand, Colette embarked on an astonishing journey across Europe. She traveled extensively, often facing hardships on the road, through France, Flanders, and Savoy. Her mission was clear: to establish new convents that would rigorously adhere to the primitive rule of St. Clare, and to reform existing ones that had strayed from the original ideals. This was not a passive endeavor. It involved difficult negotiations, challenging established norms, and inspiring women to embrace a life of radical simplicity and profound discipline. She founded 17 new reformed convents and played a crucial role in revitalizing others. Each new foundation was a painstaking effort, requiring the careful selection of sites, the recruitment of women committed to the reform, and the establishment of strict adherence to the rule. Colettine rule, as it became known, effectively reinstated the original, uncompromising spirit of St. Clare's vision. It emphasized absolute poverty, strict enclosure. The nuns were to remain within the convent walls, largely separated from the outside world, and a life centered on communal prayer and work. Colette herself embodied these ideals, living a life of great austerity and self-denial. Saint Colette was described by those who knew her as a woman of unwavering resolve, yet also deeply compassionate. She was firm in her principles, refusing to compromise on the essential elements of the rule, but she also showed great love and understanding for her sisters. She understood the human struggles of adapting to a more rigorous life and offered spiritual guidance and encouragement. Her personal holiness and her clear vision inspired many to follow her. Colette passed away in 1447, leaving behind a profound legacy. She single-handedly revitalized the Poor Clare order during a time of widespread religious decline. Her tireless efforts ensured that the original spirit of St. Clare's charism of absolute poverty and strict enclosure continued to flourish. She breathed new life into an order that might otherwise have faded into spiritual mediocrity. Saint Colette of Corbie fiercely defied the prevailing laxity and spiritual complacency of her era. Her relentless travel, her willingness to challenge established practices, and her unwavering commitment to restore an ancient religious ideal, despite powerful opposition from various quarters, marked her as a truly fearless reformer. She displayed extraordinary courage, determination, and spiritual conviction in a tumultuous period of history, proving that one woman's unwavering vision could lead to a profound and lasting transformation within a religious order. Number 2. Saint Agnes of Bohemia, the princess who said no. Agnes of Bohemia was born in Prague in 1211, the daughter of King Ottokar I of Bohemia. Her birthright placed her at the very pinnacle of European royalty. As a princess, her life was destined to be a pawn in the intricate game of medieval European politics. From a young age, she was betrothed multiple times, her hand offered in marriage to powerful princes and emperors, to forge alliances and secure her kingdom's influence. One of her most significant betrothals was to Henry VII, the son of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. Later, Frederick II himself, a formidable and ambitious ruler, expressed a desire to marry her. However, Agnes had a different destiny in mind. Despite the immense pressure from her family and the immense political implications of her choices, she consistently refused these high-profile political marriages. This was an astonishing act of defiance. To reject the will of kings and emperors was almost unheard of for a princess, especially one whose life was so deeply tied to the political landscape of her time. Her refusals were not born of caprice, but from a deeply held desire for a spiritual life, one rooted in humility and service. Agnes had become deeply influenced by the radical message of poverty and simplicity, preached by St. Francis of Assisi and lived out by St. Clare. She began a correspondence with St. Clare herself, sharing her aspirations and seeking guidance. Clare, sensing Agnes's genuine calling, encouraged her in her desire to embrace a life dedicated to God, away from the trappings of power and wealth. Driven by this profound spiritual conviction, Agnes decided to use her own considerable wealth, not for personal luxury or dynastic power, but for the welfare of the poor and the establishment of religious life. She founded a hospital for the sick and needy in Prague, ensuring that those most vulnerable in society received care. Adjacent to the hospital, she established a Poor Clare convent, intending it to be a community dedicated to the Franciscan ideal of radical poverty. This act was revolutionary for a princess. Emperor Frederick II, recognizing the immense symbolic and political power of such a move, initially tried to prevent her from entering the convent, likely seeing it as a personal slight or a dangerous precedent. However, Agnes persisted, and through a combination of her strong will and perhaps the intervention of others who recognized her sincerity, she eventually secured her right to enter. In 1234, Agnes officially entered the Poor Clare convent she had founded, relinquishing her royal titles, her luxurious wardrobe, and all the privileges of her birth. She embraced the full rigor of the Poor Clare rule, living a life of absolute poverty, manual labor, and prayer. This was not a symbolic gesture. She truly lived as the poorest among her sisters. She became the abbess of the convent, leading her community with the same humility and dedication she applied to her personal life. As abbess, Agnes continued her unwavering commitment to the poor and the sick through the hospital she had established. She personally cared for the sick, washed the feet of the poor, and ensured that the hospitals served as a true haven for those in need. Her royal lineage, instead of being a source of pride, became a means by which she could demonstrate profound humility and the jotting power of faith. She lived a life that directly contradicted the expectations of her noble status, valuing spiritual riches over earthly ones. Agnes passed away in 1282. Her convent in Prague became a flourishing center of spiritual life and charity in Bohemia, a testament to her vision and enduring influence. Her life served as a powerful example of spiritual freedom, demonstrating that true power lay not in political alliances or material wealth, but in an unwavering commitment to a higher calling. Saint Agnes of Bohemia fiercely defied the absolute expectations of her royal family and the most powerful rulers in Europe. She refused politically advantageous marriages, choosing instead a life of radical poverty and service. She asserted her personal will and spiritual conviction against immense worldly pressure, demonstrating an extraordinary form of independence and determination. Her choice to renounce her immense wealth and royal status for a life of humble service and to found institutions for the poor marked her as a woman who reshaped her destiny and inspired countless others to seek spiritual freedom over material gain. She proved that true royalty lay in the generosity of spirit and the courage to follow one's deepest convictions, no matter the cost. Number 1. Saint Clare of Assisi. The woman who walked away. Chiara of Friduccio was born in Assisi, Italy, in 1194, into a prominent and wealthy noble family. Her upbringing was one of privilege complete, with a grand family home, fine clothes, and all the social expectations that came with her status. She was destined for a strategically advantageous marriage, one that would further enhance her family's prestige and wealth. Her life seemed set on a predictable course, a path of comfort and social standing. However, a different destiny began to stir within Clare. She heard the powerful and radical sermons of a young man named Francis Bernardone, later known as Saint Francis of Assisi. Francis preached a message of absolute poverty, of abandoning all worldly possessions to follow Christ, and of living a life of joyous simplicity and service to the poor. His words resonated deeply with Clare, sparking a desire within her for a more authentic and profound spiritual life than her privileged world could offer. On Palm Sunday, March 18th, 1212, Clare made a dramatic and life-altering decision. At the age of 18, she secretly slipped away from her family home under the cover of night. She met Francis and his friars at the small chapel of Santa Maria degli Angeli, where she consecrated herself to God. As a symbolic act of renunciation, Francis himself cut her long hair. This act was a complete rejection of her family's expectations and her societal role. Her family, upon discovering her absence, reacted with fury. They pursued her, attempting to forcibly bring her back home, seeing her choice as a scandalous abandonment of her duties and a dishonor to their name. But Clare clung to the altar, resisting their efforts with unwavering resolve, demonstrating a fierce determination that would define her life. Francis initially placed Clare and a few other women who joined her at the small, dilapidated church of San Damiano, which he had lovingly rebuilt. Here, Clare's younger sister Agnes soon joined her, followed by other women drawn by Clare's radiant example and the radical call to poverty. This small community, originally known as the Poor Ladies, would grow to become the Order of Poor Clares, co-founded by Clare and Francis. Clare's most defining struggle, and a testament to her fierce will, was her unwavering insistence on the privilege of poverty for her order. This was not merely about living simply. It was about absolute corporate poverty. She refused to allow her convents to own any property or endowments, relying entirely on God's providence and the alms given by the faithful. This was an incredibly radical notion, especially for a community of women. At the time, all female religious orders were required by church law to hold property to ensure their stability and survival. The church authorities believed that women could not sustain themselves without assured income and resources. For decades, Clare fought tirelessly to uphold this principle. Popes, including Gregory IX and Innocent IV, tried to impose a mitigated rule on her order, one that would allow them to own property for their sustenance. They genuinely believed they were acting for the good and survival of the nuns, but Clare would not yield. She saw property as a hindrance to true spiritual freedom and a betrayal of the Franciscan ideal. She wrote letters, pleaded with the popes, and stood firm in her conviction, risking the very existence of her nascent order. She believed that God would provide, and that their vulnerability was their strength. Finally, just 2 days before her death, on August 9, 1253, Pope Innocent IV formally approved her own rule, which enshrined the privilege of absolute poverty for her order. It was a momentous victory, making her the first woman in history to write a monastic rule for other women and receive papal approval for it. As Abbess of San Damiano, Clare was not only a spiritual leader, but also a practical one. Stories tell of her deep care for her sisters, nursing the sick and encouraging them in their spiritual journey. Miracles were attributed to her during her lifetime, including an instance where she famously repelled an invading army of Saracen mercenaries from the convent by holding up the Blessed Sacrament, a powerful display of her faith and spiritual authority. Clare of Assisi passed away in 1253. She left behind a profound legacy as the co-founder of the Franciscan movement and a beacon of radical poverty, spiritual freedom, and unwavering faith. Her life was a revolutionary act, demonstrating that a woman, through sheer conviction and perseverance, could challenge deeply entrenched societal and ecclesiastical norms. Saint Clare of Assisi fiercely defied the expectations of her noble birth, abandoning a life of wealth and societal standing for radical poverty. Her most profound defiance was her relentless lifelong battle against the highest authorities of the Church to secure the privilege of absolute poverty for her order. She proved that conviction, spiritual freedom, and an unwavering commitment to an ideal could triumph over powerful institutional pressure. Her personal courage in walking away from everything she knew and her steadfastness in defending her vision made her a foundational figure whose influence continues to resonate through the centuries.